So when we talk about the maquiladores, we could actually look at this idea of globalization in a couple of different ways. You have the globalization of economics because you have these jobs that have come to northern Mexico, and the specific purpose of these jobs is actually to finish certain types of products. And here again, we see textiles, and then those products will be shipped back to the United States for the American consumer to purchase. You also maybe could talk about some social globalization because in terms of industrialization, which in terms and the way that it socially impacts the workforce, you see the ladies going there to the workplace. You see several ladies here working, and then you could talk about some of these social problems that actually creates in Mexico, which is in their traditional culture is very male-centered and dominated. And there have been reports about violence towards women because of the fact that men don't have jobs because the women are taking the jobs because oftentimes in this type of labor, women are hired because they're cheaper typically, and also they talk about the fact that a lot of times when you have unsavory practices taking place in this type of factory or industrial type job, that the managers of the factory are able to control the ladies, and there's less possibility of pushback or uprising or any of those types of things. We could look at globalization in another kind of way, and this is, of course, again, talking about economic globalization, but really I see when we look at the graphic or the map over here of Starbucks and McDonald's, I really see two different examples of globalization taking kind of being illustrated here. Well, first we look at Starbucks, and if you'll notice the map here, you could actually say this is both a choropleth map. You could also talk about it being a proportional symbol map, and we'll talk more about that as we get into the unit. But you see here, really the idea here is that Starbucks is reaching around the world to collect products for its coffee. So when you go to Starbucks in the morning, I know a lot of my students go to Starbucks and they don't get coffee, they get some kind of frozen latte to pretend like they're drinking coffee and feeling sophisticated. But if you look at this, you see they reach around the world to get their products, whether it's the coffee beans that are becoming from South America, maybe Africa, or they're talking about the sugar products, which maybe come from Brazil, and you see also there illustrated Australia, or the paper products for their cups and things along those lines. And so that's really what's being illustrated here in this idea of globalization, bringing companies able to reach across the world to bring products together for sale in a location. And you think about how that is only possible because of our modern transportation system, but then also you think about modern economics because you look at a cup of coffee at Starbucks and it costs a couple of dollars, maybe $2 or $1.50. I forget what the exact price is of a Starbucks cup, and that's just a regular cup of coffee. That can be a tremendous expense to a lot of people around the world, but when you talk about a very large middle class that is able to have disposable income enough to buy on a regular basis a $2 to $3 to $4 coffee drink, that says a lot about the local economy. And so this, of course, you could also talk about the way that it employs people around the world through the purchase of products at a Starbucks. Okay, so we look at economics and the way that Starbucks has reached across the world to get all their products, and then we come over here to the graphic of McDonald's, and this is talking about the number of McDonald's restaurants in a country. And so you see the way that Western companies have spread themselves across the world, and you have this company that is able to sell its product all across the world. Now, one of the interesting things about a McDonald's is that it actually will adapt its menu based upon the country that it is in. You look at places like India where you have predominantly Hindu population that is not going to be eating beef products, and so there's a lot of vegetarian options. There's a lot of options that are going to be more sensible to their religious convictions and things like that. Same thing with some of the Arab countries. We have predominant Muslims. You're not going to have any pork products. And so they're going to shy away from those things. And you also have some interesting things like in Thailand, they have these little shaker bags where you take a seasoning, you pour it over the fries and shake it. And apparently that's a favorite treat for them, favorite item for them. So the actual McDonald's restaurant is spread across the world, but they're actually going to be changing their menu as they go from country to country. So you look at globalization in that way. And again, I see these two graphics as two different elements of globalization in terms of economics. And then, of course, this is just an example of McDonald's that's in Japan. Now, one of the elements of globalization that you notice is that now, of course, there's the giant arches with it says McDonald's here over in the corner. But even if this was gone and you saw this giant M, this golden M, you would know that it was a McDonald's, and you may maybe even see Ronald McDonald here hiding behind the bushes. But anyway, so you saw the giant golden arches M, you would know that was a McDonald's, and so that is an element of globalization, this international recognition of whether it's individuals or maybe a song, or maybe it's a brand or a company or whatever. That is going to be fostered by globalization. Maybe we talk about not just the economic landscape, but also the cultural landscape as well. This is actually in downtown Atlanta. You see this picture was taken back in 2006. This is a mosque that is built right in downtown Atlanta, right off of I-75. I've actually been there to visit. And that's going to signify the changing cultural, and of course this is dealing strictly with religious, and of course with the religious talking about ethnic and other things. But you see the cultural landscape of a place like Atlanta, Georgia is changing. So of course if the cultural landscape of Atlanta, Georgia is changing, you know that the cultural landscape of places all over the world, especially in the United States with larger cities, is going to be changing. If there's a large enough Muslim population in the Atlanta and Metro Atlanta area to warrant the building of a mosque, and a relatively large mosque at that. And so, again, that's going to be indicative of the changing population. So you could talk about people moving across the world, whether it's for jobs or other things. But again, we're coming into contact with other types of people who come from different backgrounds and have different cultures. And so that's going to be changing the cultural and also the physical landscape. You could look at other things like earthquakes. This doesn't necessarily have to do with globalization, but we're talking about the way an area is impacted. You look at an earthquake, and you can think about well, what exactly is the physical element that causes an earthquake to occur. And then you also look at the way that impacts not just the physical landscape, but also the human landscape. You think about a place like San Francisco, California, that has, even though it has frequent earthquakes, we have a very large city that's located there. And so how is that going to impact the people? How is that going to impact the economy? How is that going to impact the infrastructure and the way that buildings are built, roads are built? How is that going to impact things like insurance and property values in terms of the cost of people living there? And so you really start to dig, and you start to see how people have to live different types of lives based upon the physical environment, or something like a tsunami that could of course can devastate a particular area. So this was a tsunami that occurred in 2003, and these are a couple pictures taken from NASA's website. So of course you see the prior, the before picture, and then you see the after picture here. So in the impact of the island there based upon the tsunami. And so you think about not only the impact that the tsunami had on the physical landscape, but also the people that are living there. Are the people able to come back to that location? Are they going to be dispersed? And then if they are dispersed and go live somewhere else, then how is that going to impact the place where they've gone? And so you talk about the movement of people, taking their culture with them, taking their their ideas with them. And if people stay there, then how are they going to change their living? Whether it's maybe a different type of housing or protective barriers to keep the tsunami from having as much of an impact. If you've ever been down to the coast of Florida, or you've been to really the coastal towns of any kind, you see a lot of houses on stilts. And again, a lot of that has to do with weather that comes through and might cause the ocean to rise very high. And so instead of damaging the whole house, you have these houses on stilts that are going to allow the water to pass right under the house. Maybe it gets the car or whatever, but it's not going to destroy the entire house. And so those are some adjustments that people are going to make as they're living in an area and as they have to interact with the physical environment. So when we look at geography and we begin to understand just the basic elements of geographers, if we look at geographers and what it is that they do, let's talk for a second about how they work and what exactly it is that they're going to be doing. And we talked about space a little bit earlier. So the first thing that they're going to need to do is try to create a spatial perspective. So again, it's not just the events that are going on, but you also want to look at where certain events are going on and see if things can be tied together. Again, whether it's a human event, whether it's an environmental event, and then not only where those things are not only what's taking place, but also where those things are taking place. Okay, and then we want to explain why human events are going to occur in a specific location. And then we can take the different events that are occurring and we can try and tie those together and see how those different things might be related to one another. Now, what we might find is that there absolutely is no relationship between certain events, and maybe there was just an absolute coincidence. Okay, but if we look at if we look at the events and we record them, we notice that they actually are related to each other. We know that there is some sort of relationship that exists between either the people maybe that are living there or the people in their environment. It just depends, and so it really just takes some investigating and data collection, and that's what we'll talk about next. And so when we talk about geographers and the work that they do, one of the most important elements that geographers are going to participate in is the collection of data, and this allows them to create that spatial perspective. So it's not just about the data collection itself, though. You actually have to take that data and you have to put it in spatial perspective. So that's why they're going to place their data on a map. And so when we look at the different types of maps, whether it's a choropleth or it's an isoline or it's proportional symbol, those are the different ways that geographers are going to choose to display the data that they're collecting. And so that helps us to understand how that data is related to the space that it's taking place in. And so geographers can do a lot of different things. One of the things they might do is use a database to collect their information and plug in, so they can either look to different types of governments. You have the U.S. government you can go to collect data. You look at like the U.S. Census Bureau. You maybe can go to the CIA World Factbook. A lot of other different databases that are there. You can go to the United Nations and look at some of their databases they have maybe on population. Okay, and then maybe even something like the World Health Organization. There are a lot of others. These are just some basic examples, and there are a lot of other independent databases. You might go to Gapminder, developed by Dr. Hans Rosling, and he has a lot of information on population, on economics, on age. I mean, well, of course, age is related to population anyway. So there's a lot of information and data collected on population that you can go in there and you could collect and then use that as a part of the data collection. And then so once the data is collected, you're going to put that on a map. Now there are different types of data that can be collected. And I've talked to several geographers that do different types of studies. You can either have what's called quantitative data or qualitative data. So the quantitative data is going to be hard numbers. It's going to be actual counting of things and then plugging that into the map. Then you might also have what's called qualitative data. Now this qualitative data is more interviews, talking to people, getting their perceptions and their ideas, and then taking that data and then trying to translate it and try to make some sense out of it. And so these are a little bit different in terms of exactly what kind of data it is that they represent. And so the geographers go through this effort of collecting the data so that they can then put that on the map. And we're not to maps yet, so we'll get get to that in just a little bit. But again, the most important thing that we can understand here is how the geographers are going to work to put things in a spatial perspective. Okay, and again, that's why they're going to be using those maps in order to do that. So this is it for our introduction to geography. Our next video is going to be looking at the 5 themes of geography, and so looking at what are some of the basic sets of information that we'll be looking at as we go throughout the year.